Hello, welcome to video 7 in the PETTaLS version 1.7 tutorial video series. This video is going to be the first one about the results tab in my application, and specifically about the polar response results up here in the upper left. So hopefully this isn't your first video or your first time using the program, but if it is, PETTaLS is the pretty good exciter and tactile transducer loudspeaker simulator. It's for designing and understanding the behavior of surfaces with a loudspeaker exciter attached to them. So you can buy exciters from a lot of different places, and you can attach them to just about anything, whether it's a piece of cardboard or a desk or a window, or a specially designed material that you want to use yourself. And hopefully this can help you understand what the sound is going to be like coming out of that board or panel or surface. So, okay, I'm not going to change much of anything about this default screen. The default material that comes up when you start the program is acrylic, which is plexiglass. A kind of low Q, which means dead sounding material that is not super heavy but not super light either. Clamped boundary conditions, that means that all four edges, CCCC for the four edges, are clamped of the panel. It's about 23 centimeters wide, 35 centimeters high, and I've got a single DAEX19 CT4 exciter smack dab in the middle of the panel, 0.5, 0.5. So that's halfway to the length of the panel, halfway to the height of the panel. So to speed things up at first, I'm going to restrict the simulation to just between 20 and 1,000 hertz, and we'll run this and get an initial set of results that can help us look at what the polar response looks like. Okay, before I get to that, let me talk about what the polar response of traditional loudspeakers looks like. I got this image just from a random Google search for polar responses of loudspeakers. So at low frequencies, when the cone dimensions are smaller than the half wavelength of the sound in air, you get a fairly decent omnidirectional response. So what's being shown here on the x-axis is frequency in a kind of hard to interpret line or set of tabs now that I'm looking at this, and then angle on the y-axis. So from negative 180 degrees to 180 degrees. So this is actually more than I'm showing in my plot. So these 280 and minus 180 should be the same thing, because that's directly behind the loudspeaker. And then 90 degrees is either to the left or right side of the loudspeaker. So I only show from minus 90 to 90 in my program. Okay, so anyway, at low frequencies, loudspeakers, when the actual cone driver is smaller than the wavelength in air, or smaller than half the wavelength in air, you get pretty good omnidirectional sound. So that's why from the top to the bottom of the graph, we get roughly the same color. Now there's some peaks to that, which are resonances in the loudspeaker, essentially. But then once we get to about a kilohertz or even slightly less than a kilohertz here, we start to see this beaming behavior, which is when the loudspeaker driver is larger than the wavelength of the sound in air at that frequency. So we get this beaming behavior. And the fact that all loudspeaker cone drivers that supposedly move in piston-like motion behave like this can let us derive certain things like the directionality index or directivity index, DI, which is the sort of the ratio of sound on axis, which means at 0 degrees, to the sound off axis. And that just comes from the fact that you always see this behavior: low frequency omnidirectional sound, high frequency beaming sound. And the smaller the driver is, the higher that frequency is where you start to see the beaming behavior. Panels do not act like that even remotely. So let's look at our results. Okay, this one, because I had the exciter right in the center of the panel, is pretty much omnidirectional, or is going to be omnidirectional. So we see the same behavior from -90 up to 90 degrees here. And what I'm calling -90 and 90 might be opposite of what the other graph was calling -90 and 90. I'm not sure. It depends how you want to define it. So we see these, if we go down to this on-axis sound pressure level graph here, that is just taken from the middle point 0 degrees in this graph. So this will correspond exactly to drawing a line down the middle of this graph here. And you can see that where there's a peak here, there's a peak all the way from -90 to 90. Where there's a null here, there's a null all the way from -90 to 90. And so we get a lot of these irregular things in the frequency response that are omnidirectional. So maybe you could flatten the frequency response if you have enough dynamic range to, I mean, there's 30 dB of dynamic range from this peak to this null, and that's a lot of dynamic range to try and iron out without distortion. But maybe you could flatten that if you wanted to. Let's now compare. The comparison is not going to compare this graph because I can't really keep these results there and show something else overlaid on it. So it's just going to keep these, but that's good enough. Let's compare the on-axis exciter to an off-axis exciter, and I'm going to go really off-axis here, or off-center. And we will look at that. So now the exciter is way down here in the lower left corner. And I'm going to speed this up by turning off the plotting of the simulation. So now that the exciter is no longer centered in the panel, the radiation is not going to be omnidirectional. These panel loudspeakers are really, there's a lot of companies that advertise them as being omnidirectional, and like wide spatial bandwidth omnidirectional up to high frequencies. And that's kind of true in a weird way, but it comes with a lot of caveats. So let's look at this one, for example. Now we see certain omnidirectional behavior, like this peak. See, the peak here shifted because the exciter being right on the highest point of that vibrational mode shifts the peak upwards. If the exciter is no longer attached right to the highest point of displacement of that peak, it doesn't shift upwards so much, so it's lower in frequency now. That peak is still omnidirectional, but now we have a point here with non-omnidirectional radiation. So if I go over here and plot the -90, there's a huge null right there, and then the 90, there's not a huge null right there. So no longer omnidirectional. Same deal here. So here there's a big null, here there isn't. And then there are some parts where like here there's a big null at 90 and there's not at -90. So not, you get very different sound, I guess, at one side of the speaker versus the other side of the speaker. Okay, let's compare that to, like, let's use an array of exciters now. And this array is going to be placed in a uniform or like structured and mirrored way across the midline of the panel to give nice omnidirectional sound. So I put 4 exciters on the panel, and they're all sort of uniformly spaced so that everything should ideally stay omnidirectional. I did a lot of research with arrays for panels, specifically to make them act essentially like pistons, if that's what you're going for. And you can, the bandwidth that you can get the panel to act like a piston depends on the number of exciters in your array. And there's fun stuff that you can do with that, but it gets expensive. So as far as I know, it's never really been used outside of me in grad school building speakers out of it. So this is the response with the array. Let's turn off compare results. And the cool thing about this is that the dynamic range is not super high compared to the single exciter. So we have some peaks and some nulls here, but there's less dynamic range. And then the on-axis, the average, the -90, and the 90 are not super different. So it's pretty omnidirectional up to about 500 hertz, or maybe even here, 700 hertz. So, cool. All right, let's talk about one more thing. There's a lot that you can discuss here, and these are going to look very different for all sorts of different designs, but hopefully I've given you enough information to just understand what you're looking at through this video. I'm going to set this back to 20,000 hertz, and we're going to go with only a single exciter now. I don't really care to compare the results anymore. So let's run this bad boy, and I'll be back when the simulation is done. Okie dokie, we're back with our results here. The red line that appears in this on-axis dB sound pressure level graph represents the coincidence frequency of the panel material, which is where the wavelength of the bending waves in the panel are equal to the wavelength of sound in air at that frequency. Below this, the wavelength of the bending waves is smaller than the wavelength in air. Above that coincidence frequency, the wavelength of the bending waves on the panel is longer than the wavelength in air. So at that frequency, you start to get beaming behavior, and the radiation is strongest from the panel edges and is weakest at the panel center. So looking directly at the panel, so you'll get the most sound looking at the panel from the side, and then above the coincidence frequency you start to get beaming behavior. So that's really where it starts to act like the piston. So you can sort of define directionality index or directivity index maybe above the coincidence frequency is where it makes the most sense. So let's look at, see, the on-axis behavior doesn't really show a peak at the coincidence frequency, but the -90 and 90 kind of do. It's not super strong in this example because the Q is low, so if we crank the Q up, I'm not going to go to 1,000, 100's good. And let's only simulate from 10,000 to 20,000, just for the fun of it, to sort of speed this up. There we go. So now we can see comparing, like, you get really big peaks at -90 and 90 compared to the on-axis. Let me get the on-axis response again. So yeah, that's where, see the off-axis response has a big peak here and then pretty much just takes a nosedive. The on-axis response stays a little more consistent. So panels become really directional above the coincidence frequency. Something to keep in mind, for sure. Let's see, this is still kind of a short video, so let's see, maybe I can include another simulation here. If I make the panel thicker, let's go to 6mm thick acrylic, and we'll go back down. Let's do 1,000 to 20,000 hertz. Turn off, compare. The coincidence frequency goes down. The stiffer the material is, the longer the wavelengths are, so the lower in frequency that crossover point will happen. So let's see. Yeah, now the coincidence frequency is down at 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 kilohertz. And we should be able to get this simulation finished pretty quickly here. Let's see what's happening. Yeah, boy, the Q is so high that there's just a lot of sharp peaks and nulls in the polar response here. But you can sort of see these like strong beaming things happening starting at the coincidence frequency and then moving up in frequency and towards the on-axis response. So that is what happens above the coincidence frequency. And then we start to see a nosedive in response off-axis for sure. So on-axis, not so much. Off-axis, a nosedive in response. Cool. Okay, so that's all for video 7, and I'll be back soon with video 8, which is, I would assume, about the impulse response. So I'll see you there.